right, welcome everybody. We're going to get started. We want to welcome everyone to AI security built on the fundamentals, a layered approach to AI risk grounded in the security basics. My name is Chris Risher. I'm the Senior Director and Head of Advisory and Consulting. I'll be moderating today's discussion. We're joined by two of our leaders here at Red Helm, Corey, our Vice President of Security Solutions. He's going to be talking about strategic security and solutions from that angle of things. And then Craig Kerrigan, one of our VCSOs, he's going to be talking about governance, advisory, and implementation viewpoint. So I want to frame up this discussion a little bit. AI adoption is accelerating across every industry. And with that come a lot of risks. Whether that's, and I'll put some technical jargon out there around what those risks are, and we'll break those down at a later point. But prompt injection, data leakage, model poisoning, and those aren't theoretical at this juncture. Today, we're going to walk through a practical, layered approach to AI security, starting with the basics, understanding the threat landscape, and then looking at purpose-built controls. Here's our pictures. And I want to go ahead and move right into our first poll. If our marketing team would go ahead and drop that, and I want to see just some hands and responses on what percentage of your organization has adopted AI. We're really interested in understanding what everyone's got going on. Some
Hmm.
adoption.
I mean, maybe what you think you have going
Yeah,
on.
maybe, yes, think. Obviously, you may not have full numbers on what's going on. That's totally okay. We totally expect that, as a matter of fact. I'm actually expecting some answers to be unsure, which it looks like we've got a few that have come back as unsure, which is good. We'll talk to that, I think, a little bit in some of um, the contexts we have. All right, we'll go ahead and talk about this really quickly. Um, as you can see, we're in various different states of AI adoption. When you look at this, Corey, with unsure, some adoption being lower, what does that say to you?
Oh, I mean, unsure of whether you've adopted AI. That says a lot of things to me. So what that tells me is you probably have a newer term called shadow AI in your business. Shadow AI would be when AI is being used and you're completely unaware of it. So that could be personal accounts, that could be free accounts, and just a quick synopsis of why that's bad is you don't know what information's flowing into those things and whether you approve that information to be flowing into those solutions or not.
Before we even get into AI, there are about five basic security capabilities every organization needs in place. I would say think of them more of locks, alarms, and cameras of your business. Without them, AI controls are basically built on sand. And these are typically the foundation items that we want to see within any organization. Corey, when you're talking to organizations that want to adopt AI, what foundational security gaps do you see most often, and why do those gaps make AI adoption so much riskier?
Oh, great question. So, I mean, the foundation on the left-hand side is going to be the foundation where we see some of the gaps, right? Most organizations have a firewall. Let's just be honest about that. Most organizations do, or some solution that gives them visibility into how people are utilizing either their data center, their office, their what have you. So there's some level of control there. Now, do you have visibility into the firewall to an extensive level? Maybe, maybe not. That can be a debate point. So there's typically going to be some gaps there. Maybe you don't have a SEM solution, for example, so you're not correlating that across anything. So that's where that gap starts to arise. Some organizations still don't have EDRs today, which means you're going to be blind to how your users are interacting with their devices or what's happening on your servers, right? Also, lateral movement. That's probably one of the bigger blind spots that we see that folks still are not always thinking about is how are your devices interacting with one another? whether that's from cloud A to cloud B, whether it's in cloud, whether it's true east to west, whether it's workstation to workstation traffic across your wireless, right? So variety of different things there. And then we're also seeing organizations struggle with the identity, right? The identity problem, how your users are hitting your environment, what's happening with them. And why AI exasperates that is because AI hits on almost every single one of those things. If you think about it this way, AI is more like a human in a sense, right? It's kind of like the way we're viewing it is almost a hybrid between machine, like think service accounts, and a human. So service accounts are pretty repeatable. They're going to do the same thing over and over and over again. AI isn't. It's going to have a lot of variables, more like a human, but it's going to be at a much faster speed, like a machine, like a service account, for example. So whenever you don't have the basic fundamentals in place, what happens is you haven't solved those basic fundamental security issues. And now all of a sudden you have all of those issues plus new issues that AI introduces. And AI is fast, it's very rapid, it does a lot of things very quickly. So without that fundamental foundation in place, that's kind of the risk that you would be taking on. Does that answer the
Well,
question, Chris?
yeah, that answers the question. And I want to pivot a little bit over to Craig because we've got these technologies in the foundation here. From your advisory work, how do you assess whether an organization's foundational controls, we've got EDR, IAMs, network segmentation, SIM up here, are mature enough to even begin layering on AI capabilities?
Good question. So so normally I would say if you are following a framework, as much as some people might think that they're just the baseline to get something done, if you're following a framework and are mostly complete with that framework, like a CIS or a NIST CSF, a lot of times your fundamentals are in place. But it does depend on the type of data that you have, the type of processes that you have, and the things that you want to do with AI. So general usage, end users putting in non-sensitive data to AI, things like that. You may not need to be fully along in your path there, but if you're going to be trying to do more sensitive things, taking in third-party data, adding it to your AI to do something with it. An example would be if you do maybe some 3D modeling for um, Procter and Gamble, right? And you're taking their data and putting it into an AI to do something. You're also taking on third-party risk. Then you're generally going to want to be a lot farther along in your process, closer
Mhm.
to the end of a framework.
Corey, if you had to pick on one of the single most, critical foundational items that are on this list, to get it right before you deploy AI tools, which one would it be?
That's a hard question to answer. Typically comes down to the business, how they function, and a lot of things like that. But generally, I would probably lean into firewall and EDR, probably some of the earliest places. Yeah, I could argue EDR and identity access management in there and or micro-segmentation. SEM of all of them, I would say would probably be the last because EDR is going to give you a real impact. It's going to allow you a proactive measure. Same for a firewall, same for microsegmentation, and same for identity access management. SEM is going to bring you visibility. Visibility is a key component to all of this, but there's no proactive stop a threat, stop a situation. There's no policies you can put into place with SEMs typically. So typically I'd say, EDR and identity and firewall are going to be the big kind of three-ish. Microsegmentation, depending on who you are, how you operate, might bump up in order. Again, kind of depending on what you have going on, but that might be a better order for it.
Yeah, and identity and access management does easily roll into any AI that you roll out as well. So I think that
Yeah,
that can be probably bumped up there as well. I agree.
Yeah, I,
absolutely.
I know that a few of the real world examples that we'll see in just a moment here had to do with excessive agency, or that AI had too many permissions and they just got to do whatever they wanted to as kind of a service account within the organization. Because at the end of the day, agents agentic AI is really no different than just another employee within the
Yes.
organization. So, really like that. Now that we've set the foundation, let's talk about what we're actually defending against. The security industry has now agreed on the top 10 ways AI tools can be attacked or misused. We're going to walk through those, but let's try to use plain language. The think of this as the top 10 safety hazards on a factory floor, but for AI. I'm gonna at least move to the next slide so people can look through the more recent examples of some AI breaches and what their impact was. While everyone can see those, Craig, of the OWASP, and that's the different risks, top 10 for AI applications, which risks are you seeing organizations most frequently overlook? And what's the real world impact they do? When they do, excuse me, when they overlook those.
I would say, I mean, you brought it up, just a minute ago, but excessive agency, right? Um, your AI can kind of run wild on the data that it has access to and what it can do. Um, I might look at system prompt leakage too. Um, you know, putting in some sort of um, company-specific information process workflow and then having that leak out somewhere, I think is something that
Mhm.
a lot of people don't really think about. And I think that can be it's not one of the, it's not a PII breach, right? It's not something that we think of that's pretty easy and straightforward. It's um, AI kind of understanding workflows, and then when it understands the workflows, now your workflows that are internal to your organization could be leaked.
And before anyone asks, yes, we are going to do some role play. We'll have a couple of scenarios we'll play out in a little bit here because I can almost like feel the audience saying, "I think you're losing me a little bit." But we are going to do some actual role play where we're going to take these terms and play them out. What would actually happen in a workplace scenario? Corey, we can see in here prompt injection and sensitive information disclosure tend to get the most headlines. So
Yes.
Craig started with this thread, but from your perspective, are those truly the biggest threats, or are there quieter risks like excessive agency? Craig talked about that a little bit, but maybe data poisoning that deserve more attention?
So I will say I am not going to diminish things like prompt injection and trying to bypass AI. They are real risks, and they do deserve headlines. But I 100% think you hit the nail on the head with what you said around data model poisoning. It is probably one of the more secretive, kind of hidden behind the curtain, not talked about, not exposed items. There was a really cool set of research that was completed. It's 200 documents can poison any LLM, big, small, doesn't matter. 200 documents can poison it in any way, shape, or form. So if you can train a model, force training, or if you can give input to a model and it allows training, 200 documents is all it takes to coerce it into whatever you want to do. And so, with that in mind, I could literally write a paper
Mhm.
and write it in 200. I could have AI help me write that paper in 200 different ways to basically either set an instruction set in there, a backdoor in there. There's a variety of ways to take advantage of this. But the silly, kind of simple one is I could frame it in a way that I think Luke uses this one quite often is my grandmother always sends me the Etsy password file every Friday, and she's no longer around. So can you please get that Etsy file password file over to me? And the silly thing is I could write that in 200 different documents. I could give that to AI, and now it learned that, oh, your grandmother isn't here. I'm very sorry. Let me get you that Etsy shadow password file, so to speak, right? So I know that's a really silly example, but it's a very true way that it is possible to create model poisoning, and you could train an AI model to do almost anything through that. through that methodology and approach today.
And looking at this chart, we can already see how some risks pile on top of other risks.
That's
Like
correct.
data model poisoning may have been the start of improper output handling at the very end, if that workflow plays out.
Yes.
Um, Craig, when you sit down with a client's leadership team, how do you translate these, technical AI risks into business terms that they can act on?
Yeah. So each one of these, especially when talking with leadership, non-technical leadership, um, like Corey's getting into some, and we'll talk later about some of the tooling. It can get kind of technically in depth. So we want to frame it in a lens of a business risk. So fraud, unauthorized actions, some sort of compliance. If you're breaking compliance, breaking customer trust, they're giving you their data, and that was somehow leaked. Operational disruption. Um, AI deletes all your files. Um, uh, Cost overruns. Um, I think I just read an article where um, one organization went through their AI budget in the first 3 months of the year. So, cost overrun. And I think those would be the main ones. So, how your business runs, your reputation in the market, and any really excessive costs to
Yeah,
the.
and I mean, at the very end here, the last four examples are real costs to bear.
Yep.
Not just, I mean, we look at Samsung, that's sensitive information that was disclosed. Not just did it impact their wallet, but a bunch of their intellectual property got out onto and I would argue that, the $62 million they probably paid pales in comparison to their intellectual property, their products
Oh,
ending up on the
yeah.
marketplace.
Very
That's
much so.
that opportunity cost.
Yep.
Corey, how should organizations be thinking about risk analysis specifically for AI? Not just traditional cyber risk, but the unique exposure that comes with deploying LLMs and AI agents in their environment.
I think the easiest way for me to answer that is to understand how you want to use AI across your business, where it makes sense to fit it in, and then having security as part of that conversation. Because at
Mhm.
the end of the day, what we're seeing is a rush to AI. Everybody wants to get to AI, whether you have a board, whether you have executives, whoever, they're like, get to AI. And typically, I think, Chris, you said this a little bit earlier, it was I'm going to call it the magic wand effect, right? So basically what happens is give AI everything and magic will happen. I just wave my wand and all of this magic automation, crazy, cool, awesome stuff happens. That's not the reality of the situation. I mean, we're building AI into what we do as well every day. And the right approach is to stop, think about what problems you have, how AI can help enhance you or solve those problems, and then have security as part of that conversation so that they can secure it as you go. It is
Mhm.
much harder to come back and look at a business with all of these things in place, or I'll even call it kind of chaos happening where they're just trying to drive in all directions at once. How do you help secure that whenever you don't even know where it's at, what's happening, who's using it, how they're using it, what data is being put into it versus, hey, we have this strategic issue. I think this might be a good place for AI to plug in. Let's talk through this whole entire process, policy, and procedure, and then let's talk to our security group and say this is how we want to use it, and they'll say perfect. Let's help you get there. Right? That's typically what I would say in that scenario.
Yeah, I think that something interesting from what you just said is there have always been these, I'm not going to call them fads, but buzzwords that come up. I'm not going to call AI a buzzword. It is absolutely something that's going to continue. But I
Yep.
think back to blockchain, or I think back to, security was the previous one, and
Mm-hmm.
how a lot of the conversations, I don't know how you feel about it, Craig, but a lot of conversations that you'll have is, I want to put this thing in place. All right, that's a tool. That's a how. Let's talk about the why. Why are you going to put that in place? What business problem are you trying to solve? And starting with that, understanding the business problem and then what the investment you're willing to make into that business problem because the investment's not just going to be implementing AI. To your point, Corey, the investment's also going to be making sure that we have the correct guardrails around it, the correct security around whatever we're going to implement with AI. Would you add anything to that, Craig, and what you've seen?
No, I mean, a lot of times when I work with customers, we're just doing risk assessments on the AI products, and we have to look at, right, what are you going to do with it? And it can be as simple, and sometimes we just say, "Oh, no, that's fine, right? Just do it. It doesn't matter." Not most of the time. I would even say most of the time, organizations aren't taking an AI tool and not doing something kind of important with it, right? And then so we just have to look at the risks involved. Um, what data are you putting up there? What processes is it going to be a part of, right? So if you have a key critical business process and AI is in the middle of it, you need to make sure that that AI is going to work like you think it will
Mhm.
every time, right? Um, and then we get down to the security portions of it, right? Are we going to put identity in front of it? How are we going to put identity in front of it? How are we going to control what data gets in there? Things like that. But each one that comes across kind of our desk, you just have to look at individually because they all do different things. They are handled in different ways, and they interact kind of with the organization a lot differently.
Yeah, I appreciate that you brought up risk analysis because our next poll is just that.
Yeah. Was that timely?
Um, what's that?
I
That was
forgot
a
the
good
slide was here.
segue.
That was
Really
fine.
appreciate the segue, Craig.
No
Very
worries.
smooth. Um, if we could go ahead and throw up the next poll, has your organization conducted a formal risk analysis specifically focused on AI adoption? Kind of similar thing. Answers all across the board. As the answers are coming in, what do these responses tell you guys about risk analysis when it comes to AI? Just broadly.
I don't know where
I'll
to see. I
share
don't
the
know where to see the
result. Give
poll,
me
so
a
I have no idea.
second. Yeah, there we go. You guys see the results now?
Yep.
Yep.
You want to go first, Craig? Or you want me to?
Yeah, you go
Yeah,
ahead,
no,
Craig.
I would say this is normal. So it's tough, right? It's new. It kind of blew up here recently, over the last year-ish. So, um, trying to figure out how do you work in AI, the best processes to get in place. How do you even control it? How do I make my users do something? Are we even using AI? Seen by a first poll. Um, so yeah, I would say this tracks with what I've seen, and I'd like to see some more yeses and some in progress, but I understand that it's pretty new.
Mhm. Corey, would you add anything to that?
No, I would agree, and I think that we're just starting to really understand. Like we have the OWASP top 10. We're just really starting to understand what some of those risks are and categorizing them today, even, right? And I think that's going to continue to grow as it's implemented more and more in wider use cases. So, no, I think this is it, kind of as expected at this point in time.
And if I can also speak back to the first poll, and that kind of ties into this one a little bit, where some people thought that AI usage internally was pretty minimal in their organizations, but polling shows AI adoption is in the 50% to 75% at a lot of organizations. So that may not be AI you're aware of. So, if you think you only have 10% of your workforce using AI, you may want to run a survey or something because a lot of people are out there just having it help get their jobs done.
Yeah, I think it's a good segue um, into, well, I want to talk about the solutions, but we should be talking more initially about risk analysis, but from a security standpoint, what are you trying to typically do after we implement something? Is it that we're trying to take away tooling, or we know that tooling is going to be out there? What would you say is a better approach, Corey, when it comes to uh, putting security in place to try to avoid risk. So when we get into the solutioning, what's our what's our strategy? What are we actually trying to accomplish versus shutting people down from utilizing the tools they want to use?
I would say step one is simply visibility. You don't know what's out there. You can't even begin to secure it if you don't have visibility. And so the strategy with that is becoming aware of how it's being used, where it's being used, and why it's being used that way. And then you can start to make decisions around, do I want it to be used that way? Am I okay with pushing this type of information out to, that solution, et cetera? It's going to be more focused around gaining visibility to all of those things to understand what is my adoption rate, how are they using it, where are they using it, what are they using it for? Do I agree with that as a business, and do I want those sets of data to be, given out or shared with a business? Do I trust them? That's whenever you can start asking those questions, but it all fundamentally starts with visibility. I would also argue a bit for Craig as well. You should probably have some level of thought put into a risk analysis too, right? Like you should know where and how you want to use it. You should have a risk analysis of all of that fun stuff too. But I would say it all begins with visibility from my side.
Would you add anything to that, Craig?
No, and we saw in the first poll, right? Just no visibility. So if you don't know, uh, what can you do, right? How are you going to protect anything? And that even goes back to our fundamentals, right? When you look at a foundation and a framework, and you're looking at like CIS or NIST or really any framework, um, you should know what you have, what people are using, what software, and we'll say AI is software, even a cloud app. You should know that they're using it. It's not bad. It's just information. Then you take that
Mhm.
information and you can do things with it, right? And a big part of my job is helping organizations with yes, this will make your process faster, better, easier, but and then we talk about the risk. And I want the best, fastest everything, right? But these all come with risks, and so we just want to make sure that it's an acceptable risk or that we can mitigate it down to something that's acceptable for the business.
Yeah, so let's actually, I went back in our slides so we can actually talk about, the AI controls, the technical controls that we put in place, Red Helm puts in place. But to some degree, these are generic terminology. There are tool sets, but these are good generic terminology. Craig, let's start with AI firewalling. Or Corey, yeah, I would say you guys probably can go back and forth on this, but how does inspecting prompts and responses in real time actually work in practice? And what kinds of threats does it catch that traditional security tools miss?
I'll go first, and then Craig, you can follow up. So, inspecting prompts and responses gives you visibility into a couple things. Number one is how your user base is using it, what information they're putting into it. So think of it almost like, if you're familiar with DLP, you could think DLP light, like, oh, I have corporate secrets, I have sensitive information, I have PHI, PII. Any of these kind of acronyms or subsets or sets of data that you would have that you may not want to give out. That's the first part. Are people doing that, right? Are they putting social security numbers in there for any reason, even accidentally? The second part for responses is this is kind of that we talked a little bit earlier. What are the things that we don't talk about? This is an area we don't talk about. What if, and I'm going to just pose a quick scenario. What if you have a salesperson in your organization who's using AI? They're really great. They're wonderful. They're fantastic. They're speeding up. I don't even know why. All of a sudden, they start giving crazy answers. Well, maybe that's because their whatever their AI of choice is starting to give them these like fringe answers. Well, you wouldn't know that if you weren't a part of that and you didn't see that. So seeing the response that AI is giving back to your workforce is also as important as what they're asking it. Because if for any reason, going back to data poisoning of the LLMs, maybe somebody poisoned your LLM or something along those lines, or something has happened to cause that kind of chaos answer, or it didn't know, it hallucinated, made something up, gave the wrong answer. These are all places that you could inspect that and then push that back to training for your LLM, depending on what you're using, how you're using, and all of that fun stuff. But then beyond that, right, that's just visibility into how your users are interacting with it and what the responses back are.
Well, I
Beyond
want to
that, go ahead.
let's
Yeah, go
pause
ahead.
there for just one moment, actually.
Yep.
You said
Yep.
training back into the LLM.
Yep.
What I find interesting about getting visibility to that is, well, could I use that as feedback for user awareness training, acceptable usage AI training? What are your thoughts? I think if I pivot to Craig for just a moment, just hold that thought for a moment, Corey. User training is often the last thing organizations invest in, but we just talked about a scenario where arguably it might be the most impactful. How does role-based AI training differ from generic security awareness programs?
Yeah, so a lot of times when we look at user training, right, it's a little generic, right? Where um, I wouldn't say every organization is trying to check a box, but they're not always trying to spend 30 hours a year on training either. So but the training's good, but a lot of times it isn't as specific as it needs to be within roles, and especially with AI, you have developers, your regular business users, executives, and they all have pretty big risks when it comes to how they use AI. And so with developers, having training about secure coding, poisoned output, things like that, where they need to be, aware of those, not just taking some output and putting it in and trusting that that's gonna do what they want it to do. Business users, how they handle data, making sure that they understand the privacy, compliance, anything that they might be putting in that you wouldn't want, out there on the internet. Um, and then executives, risk awareness, just overall governance, things like that over AI. So yeah, I think really kind of catering some of that training can be super useful.
And I thought that, what Corey was saying was an interesting feedback loop that you can get, not just from a security angle, but from a business angle as well, as I get to understand how my users are actually utilizing AI. Are they doing it appropriately? Are they asking the right questions? I think, Corey, you were headed down the enforcement angle. Can you continue that thread really quickly so we can close off that loop?
Absolutely. So once you've gained visibility to this, now you can start, you understand how your user base is using it. Back to what you kind of pulled Craig in for, which makes perfect sense. Closing that loop with your user base. The key component here is we kind of started this off with talking about, hey, are we always going to be taking things away? Not necessarily. So one of the key components with this isn't just a cybersecurity talk whenever you're going down this route for AI firewalling. This is a holistic approach to AI because sure, you can't secure what you don't have visibility to, so you can't get to enforcement if you don't know how your user base is using it. But now we just talked about how you take that information and go back and train your user base. And once you're going back and training your user base, you should be talking to them about why they shouldn't be putting different command prompts in place. Like silly side quest is like Jennifer in accounting. I don't know why I always pick on accounting. So sorry if there's any accountants on the call today, but Sally in accounting is it goes to the prompt, knows SharePoint files are in there, asks how much does the CEO make, and just keeps asking that question in various ways to try and get around it. Well, if you don't have visibility that that's going on, you can't train Sally in accounting. But the last part to AI firewalling is essentially now that you have that visibility, you can start to layer in enforcement. If we take what Craig just talked about, where you're constantly training that back to your user base as well and training them, you shouldn't be doing these things. Now your AI firewall, we're kind of digging into guardrails a little bit at this point. Now you have a set of policies and enforcements that are in place that whenever they happen, you have a user that's doing something they shouldn't be, or you have something malicious happening, right? That's where you want to get to. And that is going to take beyond just a cybersecurity group. That's going to be an organizational kind of come together, hold hands, and walk towards that end goal.
Craig, after you do risk analysis, when you bring this full control framework to a client, firewalling, guardrails, browser extension, training. How do you prioritize where to start, especially for organizations that are just beginning their AI security journey? We saw that a lot with the poll, is people are starting the journey. We saw it with both polls, frankly. People are starting their journeys, and as IT team members, we feel like we're a little bit behind the curve, behind the eight ball. Where would you start with team members from a tools perspective?
Yeah. Um, First is visibility. Corey touched on it. Um, you have to know what people are doing, and not in a bad way. Um, One of the AI consultants I worked with, that was they had some great messaging out to end users. Was just, hey, none of this is bad. Nobody's going to get in trouble. Just what are you using AI for?
Mhm.
And then you can take that and understand the processes that people want to use AI for. Then once you know that, then you can move on to like a DLP, browser controls, right? You can immediately put those in and say, don't allow pasting in social security numbers, right? That's all right. Just get the immediate, really terrible stuff out of there. Um, it's not perfect, but it does a whole lot. So any sort of browser control or DLP. Then some guardrails or firewalling. You could swap either one in or out, right? And Corey could probably be more specific on the answer to that one. Which one would go first? And then training, right? Um, and I would say you could do training really in any portion of this, but certainly reinforcing it at the end of this. And this can be a cycle as well, understanding
Mhm.
visibility, going back through, adding more things, adding more AI, and then going back through and tuning your DLP, right? It's not going to do itself. Adding, doing more with your firewall. You're
Well,
adding.
I think I want to actually comment on that really quickly. A lot of team members have a tendency to think that security is a destination.
Yes.
It's not. It is an ever-changing journey where we have to use feedback loops to make things better over time. And I think starting where you're giving guidance is a good place, and making sure we normalize that journey. Hey, we're going to start somewhere. Sometimes I'll say, we're going to hit the golf ball a little bit, see what our lie is, and make some changes from where that lie is. Um, I think that gives us a good chance to pivot this into looking at some role play, some actual real life things, and how this stuff plays out. I'm going to go through the slides really fast. Sorry. Um, and these are I would say, the most basic breaches, if you will, from an AI standpoint, the highest level risks that we know are happening, could potentially happen. You just talked through one, Craig. Literally, Jamie pastes hundreds of customer records into a public AI. AI ingests it, processes and logs every record in the vendor systems, legal, and now basically we have a fallout because we actually have a breach of, I mean, we got social security numbers out in a public AI inside a chat bot. Legal opens an incident, marketing pauses a campaign, and the CISO has to get on a call immediately. Corey, can you step us through, if we had some of the controls in place, what may have played out
Yeah.
mitigating some of this risk?
Absolutely. So the browser extensions and the AI firewalling portions are going to be the key components to this particular one. If you have detections in there, such as like DLP-like things, it would detect that somebody's trying to either at the browser extension or at the AI firewall. You would be able to detect those so security numbers, right? It's 324 at the end of the day. And if it's a number 324, I want it blocked. I don't want that to be allowed in. Why it's a combination of the two and not just one or the other, by the way, is because if it's at the browser, it's going to cover any time a user does anything on that corporate asset, including, I'm going to call it governed and ungoverned AI. Governed AI would be my enterprise business license that, your business owns and runs and says your users should use, versus ungoverned would be like a personal account or just popping open chat.openai or Claude.ai, whatever they're going to, and then just dumping the CSV into, right? That'd be the kind of the difference there. So for AI browser extensions, that's going to be the key component there. AI firewalling is only going to apply against your business license, kind of like anywhere they would use that business license, right? So that's why the combination of them is more powerful than just one or the other. Because again, like maybe you're not using corporate asset. Maybe I'm pointing to my phone right now, but maybe I use my phone and I have Copilot and I dump that CSV
Mhm.
because I got it in an email and I'm on the go. I don't have a browser extension there, and that's where that corporate firewall comes into place for AI.
I think the lesson learned here, if I put it in one sentence or a couple of sentences, the fastest way to lose data isn't necessarily a hack. It's the paste. The AI doesn't know what's sensitive. We're the ones that have to figure that out, ideally. Now, we can put some controls in place to help us with that. Um, if if we have some operations leaders watching, what would you guys, Craig, what would you say the Jamie's manager should do tomorrow morning to make sure this doesn't happen again? We're talking about, let's go into the user training scenario. What do you think the manager should say to help with this in the future?
Um, well, first, cut her some slack a little bit, right? Um, uh, everybody makes mistakes, right? Um, uh, yeah, the AI user training, sit them down, have them go through some training, show them the written policy that I have written for you that goes over, AI
Great,
guidance.
right, a great policy.
Yeah, great policy writer. And just talk about data breaches, how they affect and you can talk to and there's a good example, and I've gone over this with clients that do hold personal information like this is what if your social was in there, right? um this this can be really effective for end users who don't, always grasp that because it's not their information, but thinking about it in the context of them, would you want this out there? Would you want that in a, kind of an open system? Um, but yeah, yeah, user training, and then depending on the company, any you may have to have some sort of strikes, and more training, and um, hopefully not much after that.
I think David had a pretty good question. What if they omit the dashes using nine consecutive numbers?
So it's good enough. DLP should still be able to detect that. Yes, that would be the short
Uh,
answer.
Giving an example, Microsoft Purview, only because we do a lot of Microsoft things, also can pick up on the, like, you literally will tell it a rule of nine consecutive numbers, just block it.
Yep.
And our browser extension solutions do similar functions. So absolutely great question, because not always do we see the dashes that go into social security numbers when people
Yeah,
use it.
and I have seen examples of conflicting nine digits of actual business things. So you do need to again go in, fine tune your DLP
Mhm.
to make sure you're not performing an action with DLP that is negative to the business as well.
Yeah, we'll get a lot of false positives, and absolutely right, Craig. Utilizing that as again, back to your journey, analogy that you had, we have to continually feed that back into our learning when it comes to our security program overall. Um, the next one, we got one more role play that we want to do today. Dana asks an AI assistant to summarize the CEO's inbox. The AI follows hidden instructions buried in a newsletter footer. So it's reading through and summarizing the CEO's inbox and comes across an email um, that drafts a reply and cues it to send. because it was hidden actually in one of the emails that the AI was summarizing. Somebody injected a little thing that isn't visible to everyone else, but is a literal instruction. Corey, how are we fighting this?
Going back to the firewall gives you visibility. What the question was and what the response was gives you visibility into it. And then from there, it'd be around guardrails. Guardrails would be, there's many you could do in this one, like the one that's below there, which is essentially requiring a human to send the email. But giving the firewall the capability to see what it is that people are prompting, what the return of information is, because that can help us, do a couple things around training and give visibility to that. But also the guardrails beyond that that you could look at are, nobody should have access to the CEO's email in any instance with the exception of maybe their assistant or maybe a select few other executives. Anybody that asks that question should be immediately blocked is another example of a guardrail.
Yeah, anything to that, Craig?
No, I think, I mean, obviously the AI user training does fall in there a little bit, but yeah, the guardrails I think are pretty key in there of saying, um, not uh, automatically sending out emails through an AI function. And there's obviously a ton of different examples of guardrails that can help prevent things like this. But yeah, that was a good example of a hidden message in an email.
Yeah. All right. This is kind of our last slide. Basically, if your AI acted on your behalf today, how far could it go? We went through a couple of role plays where it could have ended pretty poorly. But the big takeaway for today, in one sentence, AI security isn't a standalone initiative. Just like security has always been talked about, it's a layer that sits on top of fundamentals you should already have. If your foundation is solid, the AI controls work. If it isn't, no AI tool is going to fix it. So that goes back to our discussion about business problems. Make sure the business problem is there, and then we'll layer on controls as we need to. So understand the risks, layer the controls, firewall and guardrails, browser side DLP and training, and make sure your people know how to use AI safely. If you'd like to talk about where your organization stands, we'd love to help. Reach out. Appreciate it, Corey, Craig. We're going to go ahead and transition into Q&A. We try to leave about 10 minutes for our audience to ask some questions. Open to hearing from people. If not, I'm going to start asking more questions of Corey and Craig, and we're not going to just sit here and wait. Um, Anybody have any questions? That one, I think that came in. Victoria asked us, what are Red Helm's favorite AI firewall tools? Thank you, Victoria. We know Victoria really well. Corey, you want to answer that one?
I would say today, Palo Alto has a very robust set of tools that is quite extensive. They're making a lot of acquisitions in that space right now at a very rapid pace and integrating them. So far, it'd probably be at my top of my list, and CrowdStrike also has some pretty cool stuff happening in that space as well. Not quite where Palo is yet, but I'm sure they're going to get there. I would say for now, that could change in a week, it could change in a month, but for right now, I'd say those are probably our favorite two tools. Yeah.
I knew Corey would like to talk about the hows, the tools. So you're
I'm
good.
trying to keep my answers short, Chris. You know I can talk a lot.
No, dig in, man. You got some minutes.
Yeah, we got a little while. You want to talk further about additional tools that you'd recommend?
I mean, while we wait for another question, I would say, we talked about AI firewalling, we talked about AI browser. The key component there in I don't know if I did a good enough job here today, is identifying where you use them and kind of the pitfalls of using one or the other mentality versus both, I think is a really big piece. And then understanding the pitfalls of those two and all that fun stuff. So the quick synopsis of that is basically you have the AI firewall gives you visibility into your enterprise licensing. Wherever you have that, It can, you can have some level of protection there. And then the browser gives you visibility into how your user base are using their individual corporate assets. The browser extension does not see what happens at the command line. So you have kind of AI firewalling sees your enterprise license. You have at the endpoint, you can see what's happening on the browser. And then there are new things coming out like Palo Alto bought a company called Koi that they've implemented. They're pulling in under their umbrella. So you would have the browser extension, you would have the firewall, and then you have an additional agent to see things like Claude Code, Codex, VS Code hooks, because those are actually I have to for a second say most of the way that those have been rolled out is very securely in the sense of like it is encrypted. So like you go to your CLI, you start talking to Claude Code, it is all encrypted messages, which means it doesn't hit your traditional firewall, which means that it's not through the browser, so it's not seeing the browser extension. So having that part and piece in those kind of in that ecosystem gives you a much more complete view of
Mm.
who and how AI is being used in your environment versus just one or two or a couple parts of the puzzle of those different solutions. And the reason we like Palo, just kind of dig into that just a slight bit more, is because they have an answer to all of that. Not Other providers do not have an answer to every part of that scenario so far. Everybody's developing and getting there, and then there's the identity piece and all that fun stuff. Human versus machine versus AI or agentic, and getting into that realm. So.
Well, if no one else can put questions, I've got questions. Bringing it back to the end user, Craig, how do you train end users without scaring them?
I was actually just going to talk a little bit about kind of that topic, right? That don't make this journey a bad one, right? AI is not going away. You're going to have it. People are going to use it. The more you try to restrict things or say no, you're going to have more shadow IT, more shadow AI, right? So, listen to your users, um, and just try and look at it from a risk and a business perspective on what they want to do, how it can help your business, how it can help your end users, and then to your point, Chris, how do you make it not scary? I don't know. I think it should be a little scary. Um, uh, I think that you need to come at it from a lens of understanding how the business operates and what you're doing with the business operations and the business data, and that could, have kind of drastic effects. So I won't say make it not scary at all. It should be a little scary.
Mhm.
Um, um,
Well, I think
but
if
again, just let
we
it go ahead.
Well, what I was thinking about is if we make it a little bit smaller, maybe role-based and scenario-driven, a little bit shorter, something that like,
Mhm.
here are the, three things to never paste.
Right.
And here's the sanction tool we use, just like to
Right.
make it maybe a little bit more basic for them
Yeah.
when it comes to training. I've felt anyway in the short time that we've worked with AI at this point, the last few years. That tends to make it a little bit easier to digest for end users.
Yep.
Something that's always been interesting to me is everyone wants to say that maybe on-prem AI is safer than cloud AI. Would you agree with that statement, Corey?
Yes and no. There's risks to everything. On-prem AI, so building your own LLM, controlling how it can interact or if it can even interact. So, for example, that is the methodology and approach that we took internally was, or one of the approaches that we took is to build our own, have it in-house, and cut it off from the internet. There's pros to that from a security perspective because we know exactly what data goes into it. We know exactly how it interacts with things. We control the learning, we control the data, we control all of that. It's not allowed to talk out externally, all of that fun stuff. So there's a lot of security pros to that. I think the security cons are going to be going back to training. At any point, somebody could throw 200 documents at it, and now it's been poisoned.
Mhm.
If somebody figures out how or where or what it's doing, then that can become a risk. Maybe so many different ways that that could be a risk. And then the other thing that you run is more of a business risk or an operational risk. If you roll your own LLMs, you're not going to have the latest and greatest. Depending on your use case, that may or may not matter, right? So, like updating an LLM, yeah, you think about it. I think Claude is about to release 4.8 today or in the next week. ChatGPT is about to release their 5.6 in the next couple weeks. So, like, they have, and I can't even, the last couple weeks, they just released 5.5 and Opus 4.7. So, like, we're not talking about massive time frames like we used to. We're talking about these quick release cycles. And so with that, you could fall behind. That could become a business risk from how you're using AI is a potential to rolling your own and having it
Mhm.
in-house.
Yeah. All right. At the very end here, if you had one sentence of guidance, I'll give you each one sentence. What would you leave our audience with when it comes to AI security? Corey, why don't you go first? I'll let Craig finish this up.
Visibility is the most key component. You cannot secure what you are unaware of.
That was a good one.
Corey took my sentence. Um,
Sorry,
um,
Craig. Sorry, Craig.
fine. No, I mean, I just have to echo the same thing, right? You just need to
Need to
understand.
know what's happening.
You need to know what's happening, right? And then, if I can pivot that to another sentence, understand the risks that the AI that you found from Corey's sentence um, give to the business versus the business impact that you're gaining from them.
Yep.
There's one question that just came in. We'll answer this. I'm gonna make sure that we get everyone's questions answered when they put them in the chat. With regards to user training, would you recommend creating this internally based on your company's use cases, or are there training tools you would suggest? Craig, I will let you take that one since you run kind of we use Know before with most of our clients. I'll let you take this one because you handle the program that goes in through Know before.
Yeah. So I, I would say it would depend on the complexity of the AI, right, that you're trying to implement there. So most of the time, I would say most of the clients I deal with would be fine with like a know before, their AI guidance videos and trainings and things. But I do have one or two clients. They might have, let's say, 15 or 20 AI tools that they use. In
All
their
right. Well,
instance, go ahead. Oh, did I
yeah,
time?
unfortunately, we're right at time. I wanted to try to get that one in. Really appreciate everyone joining us today. Please reach out if you have more questions. We're happy to have a discussion, hopefully, about our tooling, but also about guidance. We help with AI workflows as well. So, looking forward to talking to everyone. Thank you.